today's video, I'm going to go over BlackBerry Stock because they had their Q2 earnings for fiscal year 2026 on September of 2025. I'm going to go over the key high-level points for the conference call, and then also I'm going to go over the earnings report and do year-over-year comparison, plus quarter-over-quarter comparison, plus look at street estimates and do a comparison with that. Plus, I'm going to talk about the share price in terms of where I'm thinking it's going to head over time. Plus, go over some technicals. I'm saying plus too much. I apologize. I've done a retake of this video way too many times, but it is, in my opinion, is a really good video because it has a lot of key points. This earnings was actually good in terms of the numbers were good, but in terms of what they provide in terms of information, it is actually pretty beneficial, and I'm pretty excited for the company, which leads me to one other point here at the same time. I do own shares in the company. Please keep that in mind while you're watching this video, and please do your own due diligence and research before buying and selling. I apologize if this video is a little bit not refined, if that makes sense, because I've just done multiple takes on this, and I want to get this video out, but at the same time, it's just like constantly readjusting things. So I apologize if it's not clean cut, if that makes sense. But again, this is a pretty beneficial video because it's the information is going to be, you're going to like the information, especially if you're a BlackBerry shareholder, right? And if you're looking to invest in the company, I think that you're going to find this favorable overall. Now, in terms of the next earnings that's going to be reported, before I get to the key high-level points, plus looking at the earnings report and share price and all that stuff, is one thing to note. Earnings for Q3 fiscal year 2026 is expected to be reported on December 18 of 2025. Typically about 2 weeks prior, they release a press release to state when the official date and time is. And then Q4, this will be reported later on, is expected to be on April 9th of 2026. The reason why I mentioned that is one of their points that they mentioned in the conference call is they're going to be updating the backlog in Q4. So April 9th of 2026 is when Q4 will be reported. Again, 2 weeks prior, official date and time will be posted. Now, the first thing that they mentioned was that during this quarter, they did a significant tax payment for prior years. And I looked at the transcript and I pulled it up. It says, despite paying $19 million of tax due from prior years. The only thing is, though, when I looked at the earnings report financials, all I could find was income tax payable of $11.7 million. This was, again, for this earnings quarter, right? So $11.7 million. If anybody else knows where that $19 million is actually getting combined with overall, in terms of this earnings, please let me know in the comments down below, and I'll pin your comments so others could see as well. But I did find other taxable things in the earnings report of like 100,000 and all that stuff, but couldn't find anything that combined total of 19 million, and that made sense for the prior year's taxable of 19 million. So I don't know if this was an error. I doubt it was an error. It's just I think it's more so I can't find exactly where that 19 million is in the financials. But at the same time, though, I will state that they were profitable for this quarter of $13.4 million. And that is pre-tax, by the way, too, at the same time. But that's not, this 11.7 million is not eating into that 13.4. This came out of the cash reserves, FYI. But in terms of the quarter itself, it was profitable quarter of 13.4 million. So just let you know. So now another thing is, so continuing on the conference call, seems like QNX design wins might be ramping up, which is pretty awesome. Because that only means that, because we saw the backlog growing, by the way, so at a decent pace, a really good, decent pace in my opinion. But even though that will be updated in Q4 earnings, and they mentioned that the backlog will be updated in Q4 earnings, if it was growing at a good pace back then, and it seems like it's going to grow even faster, then that means overall BlackBerry's revenue is going to climb substantially. And if revenues climb substantially, then the share price you'll see catching up over time. In essence, and valuations will be bumped up for BlackBerry stock. So all this is great, and then it shows that there will be a bright future for BlackBerry stock in essence, right? Now, this is more so for the future. We still need to see other things happening overall, but we'll see. And then you could argue one thing, though, too, for the backlog and QNX design wins ramping up, this will be more beneficial during Q4 earnings, because during Q4 earnings, they'll be providing the full year guidance, a new full year guidance for not new, but a full year guidance for fiscal year 2027, right? So we're still in fiscal year 2026, and in 2026 of April 9th, they'll provide the fiscal year guidance for 2027. So if it comes in higher than expected and shows massive growth, then that you could see a good jump for BlackBerry share price. Not guaranteed, obviously, but that's in essence how it will go, right? So now the next thing is, one thing that I want to mention in a future video is humanoid robots will be a massive industry, and I believe BlackBerry might play a big role in terms of QNX and security in the future. And humanoid robots with QNX and cameras was mentioned in the call. This is pretty massive in my opinion. I'm going to make a video about this in the future because I am a fan of Tesla in essence and what they are doing in terms of humanoid robots as well, plus Optimus and plus their vehicles and all that stuff, but for Optimus as well, because it's a big market, I think, in my opinion. Elon Musk stated that Optimus, I think, will be roughly about $25,000 to $30,000, which is quite significant in terms of investment if somebody would want to have a human robot. But I think it would be worth it because if you could cut your grass, wash dishes, laundry, all stuff, plus tied in with autonomous vehicles and human, like Optimus can get in the vehicle and do grocery shopping, even though hypothetically there's services out there that could do grocery shopping and deliver to your house and all that stuff. But if you could just do one-time fee and have all the resources that you have just used and to do all that stuff, I think it will get to a point that every household will have a human robot for sure, at least one, if not more. And then if they mentioned already, like it doesn't have to be just Tesla, because the one thing about Tesla is it's not a guarantee that they would use QNX and for security, even though SpaceX already uses BlackBerry QNX, FYI. But I would assume that safety critical stuff and security is going to be a big proponent, like factor in terms of human robots needed, like a necessity kind of thing. Because you don't want, like for example, especially for the security aspect, you wouldn't want those robots to be hacked hypothetically, because they have visibility in terms of house and all stuff, like inside the household, right? But again, I'm getting too much into this video for this aspect. It's just more so that they did mention that human robots with QNX and cameras was mentioned in the call, in terms of, I guess things are happening in terms of deals already for the time being. Not necessarily with Tesla. I think it's more with other companies, but they are getting in that realm and it is growing. And they mentioned before as well, they're already growing in this aspect as well. And then we've seen partnerships with AMD, with robotics, with BlackBerry, by the way. I have a video up on that on my channel as well. Hopefully I pin it up on top, it'll pop up. But there is that mix as well. So these are all big movements for BlackBerry stock. Pretty optimistic for BlackBerry's future on that front as well. They have other things going on, obviously, but I'm just saying they're also in this as well at the same time. Next thing is MIT signed up for QNX in their school programs for their engineering students. I don't think I read that correctly, but hopefully you heard it correctly. So MIT signed up for QNX in their school programs for their engineering students. To me, this is massive, since this shows that the industry must be demanding it. If MIT, one of the top universities, is having their students learn it, this to me translates more growth for QNX is coming. For me, this is blatantly showing that for sure there is demand for in the market for QNX. Otherwise, MIT would not add this to their program for engineering students. And then this is great because if the demand is that strong, then that means more growth is coming for BlackBerry, pretty much guaranteed. Question is how fast, we'll see. But to me, this is showing that the speed is ramping up for QNX. And then BlackBerry UEM is seeing less and less drops in renewals, which is great for revenue front. It stabilizes the revenue front for that portion, and then you could only see it climb overall as long as renewals don't drop, right? Interesting enough, though, they seem to have increased investments in QNX, but still was able to be pretty profitable in this quarter. The reason I said interesting enough is because in the past they stated that they were dumping so much in research and development for QNX, reason that their quarters were getting hit, and then they're going to be slowing it down because they're so far ahead. And even with investments within the quarter, they were still profitable at $13.4 million, which is pretty awesome. Now, at the same time, they did get about $4 million investment fund from the Canadian government. I'm not sure if that was in the mix exactly in terms of R&D for QNX, but they did get a $4 million investment fund from Canadian government. And at the same time, it sounded like they invested more than $4 million, by the way. So it would have been just a partial subsidiary kind of thing. Or subsidized, sorry. That's the term I was looking for, subsidized. So then QNX had the most profitable quarter ever for this division, which is awesome because you could see QNX is growing overall. So again, QNX had the most profitable quarter ever for this division. They paid $19 million in tax due for prior years. Not sure how in terms of going to that point earlier, like I stated. If anybody knows how to break that down, please let me know. Otherwise, all I could see was 11.7 million plus a little bit here and there, like $100,000, so on and so forth, but nothing totaling about 19 million. I will pin your comment down below. Share buyback. This was important because there's one thing I want to show about the share price as well. After share buyback, they said they believe the company is undervalued. Now, they've said this multiple times in the past with the previous team, right? But now they're acting up on it with the share buyback. We've seen so far 2 share buybacks, but I'm not arguing. I'm going to state that I think they got third one activated now, and I'll go over that a little bit later on. But during this quarter, they bought back $20 million worth of shares, so $20 million worth of shares, so roughly about 5 million shares of an average share price of $3.97. And the shares were canceled. So this is important. They've done that before too with the other previous share buyback and cancel the shares. So now your shares that you hold are more valuable because there's less in circulation, which is awesome. And they said that they will consider in the future when it's a good time to buy back more shares. And I want to mention this. I'm going to mention this a little bit later on as well. But in terms of share price, so again, earnings was on September 25, 2025, and as of October 22nd. If you saw the share price when it went from like roughly, what was it? I can double check right now. It went roughly about $4.64. I think it was at 450 something, to be honest, but 464, let's just say, and jumped up to like 508, 509 or something like that. In my opinion, I think this was another share buyback, by the way. And if so, because I'm not looking to like toot my own horn kind of thing, but last time for the Q2 earnings, a week prior, I did a review for the share or stock and all stuff. I think it was to what you could expect for earnings. And I stated that jump that we saw before earnings a week prior was most likely a share buyback, and it ended up it was actually share buyback from what they said in the conference call. Then if that was true, and I think this is true, and then I think they're going to repeat the same thing that they did for the Q2 earnings, where in Q3, I think they're going to do a share buyback a week prior, or maybe 2 weeks prior, give or take, somewhere around that ballpark. Then in my opinion, if I'm right, again, I do own shares in companies, so keep that in mind while watching this video. And I'm not a professional, so please do your own due diligence and research before buying and selling. But I think they're planning to do 2 share buybacks for this quarter that's going to come up for a Q3 reporting time frame. And if that is the case, I think they're going to basically, in essence, do the full share buyback that they were granted for the full year cycle that they had originally agreed. I think it was roughly about $100 million worth of share buyback, which is awesome, because that pretty much shows that they truly do think that this company is undervalued. Now, you could argue that we're not seeing insiders buying the company's stock, right? So therefore, how can they be how can we take them for their word that the company is undervalued, right? If they don't believe it that to be the case. Now, there's 2 parts to this. First, we did see a little bit of insider buying shares in the company back a year and a half, 2 years ago. I can't remember 100%, but it was about $100,000 worth. Decent amount, not crazy. Hypothetically, you could argue back and forth in terms of value, but we saw it before. I would say in terms of the other portion is they are awarded quite a bit of shares. So you could argue they don't necessarily need to keep buying shares, right? That's the thing. So they're awarded quite a bit of shares. It'd be nice to see them to buy shares in the company at the same time, but they do have quite a bit of shares. So there's that aspect for it. But at the same time, they are definitely putting in the money to buy back shares in terms of the company, which is awesome, making the shareholders' value go up as well because those shares are being canceled. So I think they're doing a great job. I think they're acting on what they're stating, and for them to do insiders to buy shares as well be nice, but I don't think it's necessarily needed because they're awarded quite a bit of shares, if that makes sense. And then for the ones that are new that don't know 100%, when you see them selling their shares, it's more for the taxable front. So they're awarded shares, and then they sell shares to pay the taxes for those awarded shares, if that makes sense. So there's that. Because I do see those comments sometimes. They're unsure why the shares are being sold at the same time. But it's only a portion of the awarded shares. Now, the next thing was share buybacks. And then and then I don't know if I mentioned it, but they said they'll consider it in the future when it's a good time to buy back more shares. In my opinion, I think this was one transaction because, by the way, on October 22nd, when it did go up, by the way, and the share buyback was going through, I think this was share buyback in my opinion because it was quite a bit of a jump and quite a bit of volume, and then it did drop down, but that was because the whole entire market was dipping down. Significant, by the way. I think it was a significant drop that day. It was pretty decent, a decent drop for sure. So the market got pulled down. So it was unfortunate they decided to have it bought that day, but maybe it was good because maybe the dip would have been lower, but I don't think so because it seems like we have a good base of support right about here anyway. But I'm going to get touch base more on the share price because indications are showing more upside to come anyway regardless. But either way, I was a little bit jumping too much on the share price right now, but we'll get back to the conference call. So guidance was increased since they were more conservative with their numbers. They mentioned that they increased their guidance. They were conservative with their numbers when the tariffs and government cost savings were more of a concern back then, but now it's less of a risk. And I'll show just the guidance right now back and forth. So this is the Q2 earnings right about here, September 25, 2025. Let me just minimize this a little bit. And then let's go to the outlook. So right about here, fiscal year outlook. And then let me pull up the previous quarter. This is June 24th, 2025, so Q1 earnings, right? So this was the guidance they provided earlier. I'm just going to go over the two most important things, the revenue, total company revenue, and the profit that they're expecting to have for the fiscal year. So originally it was 508 million to 538 million, and they increased it to 519 to 541 million. I'm most likely expecting them because BlackBerry tends to hit their estimates on the high end, which is pretty awesome. But my main focus is the cash flow, which they bumped it up to 35 to 40 million. Previously, just FYI, it was 35 million, right? So a little bit of a bump, which is pretty awesome. Again, they tend to be conservative with their numbers, and they end up beating their estimates. So I'm expecting to be at 40 million, or if not a little bit higher, which is pretty awesome. So company's doing great, which is, yeah, great for sure. So then guidance was increased. So now it sounds like after tax pay and restructuring, BlackBerry will basically have a profitable. BlackBerry will basically have profitable quarters moving forward, and this is not counting the Arctic Wolf final pay of silence sale deal of almost $40 million possibly coming in next quarter. So I think it's going to be coming in Q3, by the way, FYI. So if you remember, they sold silence to Arctic Wolf, and they have another payment of $40 million coming in. And I believe it's going to be reported, and at least I think that's what they stated in this conference call, that'll be coming in during Q3, just FYI. The only thing is, or not the only thing is, so from Essence, what I'm picking up on and what they've stated and all stuff, it looks like we're just going to keep making profits as we go, as the quarters keep going, which is great. Again, like I've stated in the past, the last team, with John Chen and all stuff, it was important the way they were structuring in terms of the turnaround foundation. The only unfortunate part is in terms of financials and hitting the financial targets, it wasn't that great. It was constant up and downs nonstop. This team, their focus on financials was phenomenal. BlackBerry was on the low side, but even though it was on the low side, it's starting to ramp up and they're hitting their targets. So I don't know how to explain this, but it seems like it's just straight up from now at this point. And once it starts hitting a certain type of revenue, you'll see adjustments in terms of analysts and all stuff, and the share price will catch up and start rising up. I think we pretty much hit a baseline, if that makes sense. Again, I do own shares in the company, so please do bear that in mind while you're watching this video. And please do own due diligence and research before buying and selling. But there's that part. Now, another thing is too, which is quite important actually. So China market is starting to be more interested in safety for ADAS. If you remember in the past, China, the way that worked was, in essence, they build a lot of EVs and all that stuff, right? And they're quite competitive because of their cost for their vehicles is quite low. And then they do pump out a lot of volume internally for vehicles to be used in China. The downfall is, in terms of BlackBerry, they didn't really make too much profit on the safety critical and security aspect for the Chinese sold vehicles in the country, right? Because they weren't really too concerned on that aspect, even for the ADAS vehicles. But there was being sold, but not too much. It was more so for the vehicles that China was exporting, because the other governments had safety critical legislation, like rules, to have those enforced, right? So they had to meet those standards through the exported vehicles. But as of recent, which is as of recent, where in the past earnings call, I basically mentioned it, but where in the past earnings call, China auto markets or makers did not care much for the safety for cars sold in China. Looks like I should rephrase this. So I'll read the whole entire thing and hopefully that will make sense. So China market is starting to be more interested in safety for ADAS, where in the past earnings call, China automakers didn't care much for safety for cars sold in China. Looks like the interest is coming after a high profile accident that possibly happened. And I looked it up. I tried to find what this high profile accident was. And if I'm not mistaken, this happened in March of 2025, which unfortunately, the vehicle was an ADAS, and it got to an accident where three college students ended up passing away, and this basically led to a traction of a bunch of people asking for safety regulations to be in place for these vehicles, because there has been other incidents, it looks like, in the past as well. And there wasn't really much for safety demand for safety, but because it resulted to the death of three college students, which is unfortunate because I'm assuming they're young because they're still in college, which is highly unfortunate. The safety portion is being pushed way more because people are kind of getting tired of this, and they're seeing the effects of undermining the safety critical portions of ADAS and the safety critical portions of vehicles right on the road. So with that push, we'll be seeing more of a demand for QNX safety critical portions for their vehicles and ADAS portions, right? So that will be another revenue front. And then back to the next point, like I stated earlier, with the backlog growing. So we are seeing traction overall for the company, and we in my opinion, even though revenue is still quite low for fiscal year 2026, even though with the ramp up of the revenue that they had, I think fiscal year 2027 is going to be quite strong in my opinion, especially with the backlog. It's going to have to come in at one point, and the margin for the backlog is essentially like 99.9%, or like it's essentially almost 100% margin, which is pretty great. Profit margin. Now, in terms of earnings numbers, I'm going to go over that, and then I'm going to go over the share price right after. So first thing is total company revenue. I'm going to go really quickly on this portion, but total company revenue exceeded previously provided guidance at 129.6 million, increasing 3% year over year. This increasing 3% year over year is a little bit off, like not sure how that's the case, because I'm going to show something. But first of all, the guidance that they provided previously was 115 to 125 million. They obviously beat it with 129.6 million, which is pretty awesome. And then the street estimates, if I still have it right about here, where is it? Was about 122 million on the average front, and then 125 million on the high side. So they obviously beat it with 129.6 million, which is awesome. The reason why I said the year over year is kind of strange though, is because last year, again, just to show this, September 26, 2024, it's 145 million. So obviously year over year decline. I'm not sure how that statement works out exactly, but the thing is though, this quarter was better than the last quarter, if that makes sense. Again, 145 million in revenue, but if you look at the profit loss kind of setup in terms of like how much they made, they actually lost 18 million, right? So versus this quarter, again, just to show you, just to make sure, 126.9 million revenue versus this quarter, they actually profited 13.4 million. So let me see, 13.4 million. In case you're wondering, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but the tax payment of 11.7 million that came out from the cash reserves, right? But 13.4 million this quarter was actually pure like profitable, 13.4 million. Now let me see what else was there. The quarter comparisons, last quarter, so that was going to say last quarter was 162 million versus, so just to show you, that was not the right quarter, my apologies, good thing I checked there. Last quarter should have been June 24, 2025, because I'm going to say that was a little bit high. I was like, what's going on here? 121.7 million versus the 129.6 million right there. So it's quarter over quarter growth and year over year decline, but again, it's profitable this quarter. So hypothetically, it's great year over year and quarter over quarter kind of growth mix up kind of thing, if that makes sense. But the revenue is quarter over quarter growth and year over year decline in terms of purely revenue. And then in terms of the next front, so 129 right here. So then total company GAAP and adjusted gross margin increased by 4% points year over year to 75%. QNX revenue beat guidance and achieved 15% year over year growth to 63.1 million. Again, this is the highest they've ever received for this division, which is awesome. QNX segment adjusted gross margin were flat year over year at 83%. And let me just show you last quarter's. It was 57.5 million. The forecast was for the QNX was 55 to 60 million. So they beat the high end and surpassed it as well. Again, at 63.1 million. So you can see growth for QNX. And then last year's QNX, just to show you, I believe it was IoT still named. Yeah, it was still IoT named, and it was 55 million. So we have year-over-year growth, quarter-over-quarter growth, beat their forecast as well. So QNX is doing phenomenal, especially with that backlog growing. We're expecting it by Q4, all that stuff. Let me see, QNX adjusted EBITDA beat previously provided guidance at 20.5 million or 32% of revenue. Secure communications revenue exceeded previously provided guidance at 59.9 million, decreasing 10% year over year. Secure communications segment adjusted gross margin increased 5% points year over year to 66%. And then secure communications ARR increased year over year and sequentially to 213 million. Secure communications DBNRR was flat year over year and increased by 1% point sequentially to 93%. Secure communications adjusted EBITDA exceeded previously provided guidance at 9.7 million. So for secure communications, they got 59.9 million last quarter. Or actually, I'll just go over the guidance. The forecast they provided is 54 to 59 million. So they obviously beat it on the high end and surpassed it by 0.9 million. And then in terms of last quarter, it was secure communications 59.5 million. So they had quarter over quarter growth, which is pretty awesome. And then last year, I doubt it was growth because, again, they had silence last year in the mix. So last year, the division was called cybersecurity as opposed to secure communications, and they had silence in the mix, and it came in at 87 million. So year-over-year decline, unfortunately, for the that division. But again, it was silence in the mix, right? So there's that front. Licensing revenue was 6.6 million, and adjusted EBITDA was 5.6 million. I'm not going to do comparisons with that because essentially it's usually about 4 to 7 million, give or take, 4 to 8 million. So it's around that ballpark. And adjusted EBITDA was 5.6 million. I don't know if I read that just in case. Total company adjusted EBITDA exceeded previously provided guidance at 25.9 million or 20% of revenue. Total company GAAP operating income was 11.5 million and 9.5 million increased sequentially and 9.3 million increased year over year. BlackBerry achieved another quarter of GAAP profitability with GAAP net income of 13.3 million and adjusted net income of 24.2 million. GAAP basic earnings per share was 2 cents and non-GAAP earnings per share was 4 cents, beating the previously provided guidance. Operating cash flow for the second quarter beat expectations at positive 3.4 million. 20 million was returned to shareholders by repurchasing of approximately 5 million common shares during the quarter. Total cash equivalent, short-term and long-term investment, therefore, decreased by 18.4 million sequentially to 363.5 million. And then one thing I want to mention, these were key things that they had in the past. Like basically every single time they release a press release during the quarter, it's just a recap of the same things. But one thing also I wanted to mention was here. So some of the key points, I guess, I'll mention this one, but the main one's the QNX one though. Deliveries year-over-year revenue growth, expanded adjusted EBITDA margins and GAAP profitability, as well as positive operating cash flow. But the main focus was here. QNX division achieves rule of 40 quarter with revenue and adjusted EBITDA above guidance, raising full year guidance. So this is important because even though I don't think they're going to be selling QNX, this is usually appealing to investors in terms of if they were trying to buy a company and all stuff, right? So this is pretty important, and it shows that they're on the right track overall in terms of financials, which is great. It's really good. The next thing I want to go over is let me see, comparisons. So the next thing is in terms of share price. Now, interesting enough, actually, for the share price, can I make this smaller? No. So for the share price, I want to show this. So right now we're sitting at $4.78 US. Hopefully you can see, you can't see it, but you can see it right here, $4.78. And you can see it right here in the green too as well. So as of, when was this? November of 2024, we had an upward trend support level, and then we had a downward trend resistance level that had technically 3 touch points, because there's 2 touch points here and a third touch point right here. And this dates back since February of 2025. So if you remember that spike up we had in terms of like, was like $6, roughly about $6.20, give or take. It was probably more, but this is like more zoomed out, so it's not fully detailed. but we had a downward trend resistance line. We pretty much broke through it a bunch of times, and we bounced off moving averages and off it a little bit as well. And I'm going to show more stuff. But if you look at all the moving averages, 1 month mark, right? Past it, 3 month mark, past them, 6 month mark, past them as well. Yeah, you can see past them, right? And I'm not saying we're not going to come back down to them, but I'm just saying, in essence, everything is pretty much above the levels, past the downward trend resistance line, right? And then the MACD lines. Here's the 1 year chart, MACD line curving up to the upside. So right now it's in the bearish territory, but it could cross over to the bullish territory, showing more upside. The 5 year mark is already in the bullish side. Yeah, already in the bullish side, and past the moving averages as well. We're past the 50-day moving average, 100-day moving average, 200-day moving average, and passing this downward trend resistance line, plus with the MACD line pointing up to more upside. And I believe the alt chart, same thing. Yeah, more upside as well. And then the thing is too, the only moving average right now we're hitting is in the alt chart, with the 50-day moving average for the alt chart at $4.73. Now we've seen a little bit of resistance getting to that range. We did pass it, then we get pulled back down underneath and all stuff. But in essence, we're in the ballpark of the 58-day moving average. And the next zones I'm expecting to move at, I think there's a good chance we could get there before earnings, but especially after earnings, I'm expecting basically the share price to be between $5.50 to $6.50 in essence. Like, I don't think we'll be under $5 after earnings, in my opinion, unless obviously the markets. So I should say anything's possible with the markets. If the markets drop down, which I should state, like I said, I showed earlier, let me show 3 month, right about here. For example, they did a share buyback. We spiked up to $5.08, 9 cents, whatever. The markets had a horrendous day right after. Unfortunately, it was like literally the worst timing, and then just got dragged down. So it like the markets could still pull it down, but if the markets don't go crazy, in my opinion, after earnings for Q2, I think below $5, I don't think we'll see it unless something drastic happens, bad earnings or bad financials in the future and all that stuff. But the way the company is moving forward, I think $5, under $5 won't be happening again. Again, this is my opinion. Please be mindful. I do own shares in the company as well, and I'm not a professional. But that's my take for it. I think $5 will be pretty much, so maybe before earnings between $5.50 to $6.50. That might be a little bit aggressive, but in essence, I'm expecting after earnings to be within that range of $5.50 to $6.50, somewhere between there after earnings. More so hovering around $5.50. Like what will happen, most likely, just because it's like constantly like this, is earnings will get reported, will spike up into terms of $6 mark, give or take. Where will that be? Maybe low $6, maybe $6.50, but in essence, just let's say low $6, and then we'll start trickling down, because unfortunately, BlackBerry will report earnings, will spike up, and then start trickling down, which is unfortunate, and it'll trickle down to like the $5.50 zone. That's what in essence I'm expecting, and then basically leading up to Q4 earnings, which will be reported again in April 9th, 2026. Trickle, like it'll be 550 ranging again, like I said, maybe 550 to 570, and then start climbing up to the $6 mark leading up to the earnings, and then have another spike up, because I'm expecting, in my opinion, again, I do own shares in the company, I'm expecting the outlook for fiscal year 2027 to actually be a good one, because I think the backlog should be growing substantially, especially from what they stated in their they didn't state it blatantly, but from what I was picking up on, I think there's a good amount of design wins coming in for QNX. And if that is the case, I'm expecting the backlog to grow substantially, especially since the share buybacks might be they're not aggressive share buybacks, but I think they're getting more aggressive on their share buybacks, because when they did the first share buyback, by the way, I thought that was just to prove a point that the company's undervalued / we said we're going to do share buybacks, therefore we did, and that's it. The coast is clear. They could act up on more share buybacks, but I didn't think they were going to 100% act up on them 100%. I thought more so they were going to just maybe do one more and that's it. But when they did the share buyback before Q2 earnings, and now I think this might be another share buyback, and if that is the case, and I think they're going to do another one before the Q3 earnings report, I think they're, in essence, they know what's coming, right? / the design wins and all that stuff, and how the backlog is going to grow and how revenue is going to grow, that they truly do think the company is undervalued. Therefore, it is good return on their investment to do the share buybacks to the full extent of what they're allowed, and then therefore increase shareholders' value, which is beneficial for them too, because like I said earlier, they do own shares in the company because they're awarded quite a bit of shares. And when it comes to selling them, they only sell the amount required to pay for the taxes, maybe a little bit more for spending stuff here and there. But in essence, they do have a lot awarded to them, and they do keep a good amount of them as well. So it's beneficial for pretty much everybody in essence. So that's my opinion on everything. And if that's the case, if I'm correct, I think fiscal year 2027 guidance will be a good one. But again, I'm not a professional, so keep that in mind while you're watching this. And I do own shares in the company, so also keep that in mind as you're watching this and taking the information that I'm sharing, right? In my opinion, that I'm sharing as well. And that's basically it, I think, in my opinion, for the most part. But essentially, indications, just to wrap up one other thing, is indications for MACD line for the alt chart. It's pointing up to the upside, more bullish. It's strong green, by the way, pointing up to the upside, already past the 50-day moving average. And then the 100-day moving average, just to let you know, is at $6.59. So $6.59. So that, by the way, when I got the 550 range to 650 range, I do other technical analysis, and that's where I got the numbers from. It's not just like random, etc., etc. So 550, 650, but unfortunately, the way BlackBerry works out, I'm expecting a spike to somewhere between the low $6 to the 650 range, and then get pulled down, unfortunately, which is unfortunate, to the 550 range, to 570 range, and then start climbing up, like I said, to the Q4 earnings to maybe the $6 range. Not necessarily the 650. I don't think, unless the earnings is going to be phenomenal. I'm expecting the earnings to be good, but it's just like, the problem is it's more for the guidance we need to see ramped up, and that might not happen overall, but we'll see. Nobody knows for sure. I believe I covered everything. If I missed anything, let me know. I'll try to make another video, and I will have another video out where I go over what you could expect for Q3 earnings as well. Be on the lookout for that. I apologize for the delay, by the way. I had a bunch of family stuff happen. One of my family members was in the hospital and all that stuff, and I wasn't able to allocate too much time into this for the time being. But hopefully in the next before earnings for sure, I'll have what you could expect for Q3 earnings for sure. I'll have that out. And if you want to be notified when I have that video uploaded, consider following and subscribing so you'll be notified when I do. And I'll be live streaming this conference call as well when it does happen as well. That's basically it. Apologize for the video being so long. Apologize for the video not being refined. But hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you liked it. And thanks again for watching and supporting. Appreciate it. Take care. God bless and peace.